This one is from 1859. Animal Life of the Mammoth Cave. Professor C.W. Wright of Louisville, speaking on the Mammoth Cave, says myriads of bats are found in the Mammoth Cave, especially during the winter months. These animals are not in a torrid state in winter. Robin St. John 49, thank you for your donation. Appreciate you very much and welcome. 205 broke 200. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for being here, guys. Myriads of bats, okay, especially during the winter months. These animals are not in a torrid state in winter, but frequently change their position from one avenue of the cave to another. In these parts of the cave, when there is no air in motion, the bats hang in clusters of thousands, suspended by their hinder extremities, heads downward. The wings of the bats consist of membranous expansions over the fingers of the animals, which are enormously developed. The bat moves through the air like the butterfly and does not produce a rustling sound with his wings like that are produced by birds. The eyes of the bats are much smaller relatively than those of any other nocturnal animal and are very little use to him. In fact, he regulates his movements in flying and securing insects by a sense of resistance, for if the sight of one be destroyed, he is enabled to fly about in a room through which wires are stretched in various directions without striking one of them. He will secure his food upon the same principle, as well as direct his course in the cave, which a short distance from the entrance is absolutely destitute of every ray of light. The bat secures insects and feeds himself by means of the interfermal membrane, which extends from the tail to the hinder extremities, and which the animal uses as a net to catch its prey. The hair on the undersurface of which is arranged in concentric rays, so that when the tail is bent forward, any object on the membrane is rolled to the point of that organ, and thence the animal's mouth. Very interesting. When thrown upon a level surface, the bat cannot rise and fly, but has to crawl to an elevated object from which he throws himself into the air and thus enabled to use his wings. The cave rat is a larger size than the Norway rat. The hair on the back resembles that of a gray squirrel. That on the abdomen and the feet of a light color. The whiskers are long and the eyes are prominent and resemble those of a rabbit. The jaws are powerful. Let's get to some weirder ones. Wild animals such as foxes, wildcats, coons, bears, etc., never enter the Mammoth Cave, nor have their remains ever been found therein. When the Mammoth Cave was first discovered, hundreds of mummies were found in it. This is what I wanted to get to. Again, when the Mammoth Cave was first discovered, hundreds of mummies were found in it. They were dressed in the skins of wild animals, and in many instances were highly ornamented with heads of bone, shells, feathers, etc. They were in a better state of preservation than the mummies of Egypt, and even when exposed to damp atmosphere, showed no disposition to decay. The mummies were preserved mainly by means of smoke, and the place where they were subjected to the antiseptic influence of the agent is still to be seen. It consists of a stick which is suspended between two projecting rocks in an alcove 20 feet above the floor of the main cave. Cross pieces are lashed to the pole by strips of bark upon which the arms and lower extremities were extended. The extremities of the pole bear the marks of the stone hatchet and have remained so long in their present position that they are encrusted with crystals of carbonate of lime. The ceremony of embalming could have been witnessed by at least 10,000 persons, for the avenue in which the operation was conducted is 100 feet wide and half a mile in length. The same point was evidently used at times as a place of torture, inasmuch as bone ashes have been found there, which were evidently those of victims of some barbarous sacrifice. Now, again, remember what I was saying, that you had several different groups of people. Some were cremated, and often they like to jump to conclusions that there was some kind of sacrificial thing going on. But there could have been, but there's a lot of evidence to show that the funerary rites, that they were dealing with many, and they even found jars in the Mammoth Cave full of ashes. When the manufacture of saltpeter, so this is the part that I mentioned earlier, and really important to think about. When the manufacture of saltpeter was commenced, the mummies were used as fuel and were destroyed in various ways, and a few were carried away and placed in the museums in different parts of the United States. This is one of the only articles where you can find mention of this. That, remember, hundreds of mummies were found, and that they were embalmed in a kind of way of basically being smoked, and that when they first started to use the saltpeter, which was used during wartime, the mummies were used as fuel and were destroyed in various ways. And a few were carried away and placed in the museums in different parts of the United States. It's just horrible. They just burned the mummies up in the cave. So, all right. I don't want to do that one. Yeah, we'll do this one. Kentucky, 1876. The prehistoric age. Discovery of another mammoth cave near Columbia, Kentucky. 3 human skeletons of extraordinary proportions found in a subterranean vault. Columbia, 1876. About the middle of the past week, 2 young men named White, wildly wandering in a large tract of wild, dense forest in the southeastern part of the country, discovered what they supposed to be a sinkhole or a fox den, and with that idea proceeded to explore it. After a little trouble in making their way through the entrance, the cave became large enough to admit their walking upright. They had proceeded thus in the passage probably 150 yards when they emerged into a large and picturesque gallery, the beauty and grandeur of which will rival that of the old mammoth itself. The room, according to their calculations, was about 150 by 100 feet and abounds in all varieties of stalactites and stalagmites. But 'tis not the things that we naturally expect to find in caves that I wish to mention, particularly by the curious remains that were discovered therein. In the northeast corner of the first gallery, about 5 feet from the ground, they noticed some strange characters or hieroglyphics neatly carved in the wall, which upon close examination proved to be the head rock of a vault. A few minutes prizing served to loosen this and disclose to view the interior of an enclosure in the solid rock of about 5 feet by 10 feet, which contained the remaining of 3 human skeletons, which measure 8 feet 7 inches, 8 feet measure 8 feet 7.5 inches, 8 feet 5 inches, and 8 feet 4 3/4 inches in length, respectively. The heads were laying towards the east, each body parallel to the other. Beside them lay 3 huge, what looked to be swords, but were so decayed that upon being touched immediately crumbled to dust. After examining the remains closely, but finding nothing that would serve to throw any light on the question as to who and from whence they are, they closed the vault, but in doing so knocked their torch out, which they had contrived before entering, leaving them in anything but a pleasant predicament. After searching some time for their lost treasure, they concluded to try to escape by feeling their way out. But in this, they made the matter worse. They stated that after leaving the first large room, they struck a good sized branch and continued following it until forced to turn into another passage, the stream disappearing suddenly in a huge perpendicular gulch, which led them into another spacious hall, the size of which they believed to be quite as great as the first. Out of this second opening and through what they conceived to be 3 others similar in at least size, their way seemed to gradually ascend until their hearts were made glad by the discovery of light ahead, and finally emerged from their ugly confinement through a hole about midway the cliff of Russell's Creek. Having been confined in their subterranean discovery over 38 hours, the whole country thereabout is rife with speculation concerning the interesting discovery, and numbers of citizens will visit it as soon as the Messrs. White finished their work of rendering the entrance less difficult to pass. The above is a correct account and may be relied on, as the young men are of impeccable veracity, With a party from town, your correspondent will start in the morning to further explore, and should new curiosities present themselves, will give you the account of an eyewitness. Well, I checked the Hartford for the following days and nothing ever pops up. So you can imagine why. But yeah, three giant skeletons, all well over 8 feet, heads facing east, three giant swords. Pretty nuts.